Hello and welcome to Arctic Game Talk this wonderful Wednesday morning. My name is Johan Linder and this is my colleague
Therese Mossberg.
So pleasure to have you here again. We'll start off with some local Arctic Game Lab news. We are planning to have a game jam in September. It will probably be in Skellefteå, but we could perhaps include more sites. That's something we're going to look into. But it's definitely going to be in September when the school starts. We also invested in 23 computers with quite a lot of capacity that can be used by our companies and projects and so on. They will be used this summer by student projects for summers, but they are available in the test lab if you're interested in using them.
And then this talk, Arctic Game Talk, will continue until June 17th. So we have this talk and 2 more to go before the holidays. We'll be back in September again with more talks, but only every second week. So we'll see more about that. And if you have any suggestions about topics and speakers, please let us know.
Super. We're also gonna attend Bit Summit Gaiden 27th to 28th of June. And that will be Arctic Game Lab and Innovation Game 2.0 sponsoring that participation, and we'll be able to have up to 3 companies that we showcase. So if you're interested in the Asian market and quite a lot of focus on consoles, you could contact us and we will perhaps let you be one of those 3 companies that we bring forth. So over to some local news.
Summers Foundation. Thanks to Summers Foundation, 21 students will have the opportunity to develop gaming projects during this summer. Tomorrow on Thursday, the projects and the students will be presented at the Great Northern. And this morning we'll have one of the studios with us, Flattail Studios, that will have some students during this summer. So hello, Eddie.
Hello.
Hello. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
So you're going to have a number of students. Is it 4 students from Summers this summer?
Yes, we will have 2 tech students and 2 artists.
Super. And how will you be using them? Will they be developing new like games or prototypes for games, or will you use them in your existing production?
We will have them first get knowledge about our game currently, and then they will hopefully implement some of their own features that we guide them to, and then their own take on that feature into the game.
Super. And you've had some students before?
Last year we had 1 student, and that was a great experience because he still with us as of this day.
Fantastic. So I assume Summers is quite beneficial for you then as a studio.
Yeah, it's really helpful, and it's actually we learn a lot from the students as well.
That's great. The best way it can be then.
Yeah.
And we will have, as you said, 22 students.
21.
21 students coming out for Summers this summer. So it's a lot of projects in Skellefteå that will be helped. And we hope that Flattail will have a lot of help from their students. And it's going to be learning for both Flattail and the students. Super. Thank you for participating.
It will be excited to see this fall what comes out from all of these projects.
Yeah. All right. Further on, we have Hay Fever, the game that was released by Pixadome about a sneezing postman. They were ported to Switch and Xbox and PlayStation recently, and we now have word that they are going to Japan as well, together with L2 Business. So that's good. We hope they will have good success in the Japanese market. And they will, of course, be one of the companies that we showcase on Bit Summit Gaiden as well.
If you have any more news, just let us know. Email us to news@arcticgamelab.com.
And if we look at the global and event news, it's...
yeah, we have this Sweden Game Pitch on June 17th coming up very soon. We have some tickets or free participation for Arctic Game Lab Studios. So just let us know, email us, and we will pass on the code to sign up for that for free.
Yeah, we also had a list of events that is coming up now together with Meet to Match. So we have Indiegogo 2020 in the Netherlands. It's June 26th. It's of course a digital event. It's free access for publisher and investors. So those of you that are that can access it for free. We also have Ludicious 2020 in Switzerland, July 1st to 3rd. We have First Playable 2020 in Italy. That's going to be July 15th to 16th. We have the Indie Game Business and Meet to Match Online San Francisco edition, August 4th to 6th. And then finally we have the Meet to Match Online Cologne edition, August 25th to 27th. So that's our events that is coming up, and we will of course put out the links in the chat later.
And now it's time for the guest of today, Alexander Milton.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Welcome to Arctic Game Talk.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
So you work currently as a business coach at eSweden Game?
Correctly, down in Linköping.
Fantastic. And you also run a number of game companies?
Yeah, I've recently started my third company that works with game development or some kind of tech development related to games.
Yeah, cool.
So I think I'm almost qualified to call myself a serial entrepreneur, at least very soon.
Sounds interesting. Sounds great. So please tell a bit about your subject and please present.
Yes, absolutely. Should I start sharing my screen?
Yeah, please do.
Let's see now. There, can you see it?
Yeah.
All right, lovely. So my idea is that I will simply share some of the lessons I've learned from being part of and coaching startups, basically. I want it to be some of the insights that I think others should bring with them. So the target audience is definitely people who are in their early years of running their first game company or are thinking about starting a game company. And a little bit about myself. Like I said, I'm Milton. I'm a business coach at eSweden Game, which is both a community and a physical co-working space. And as well, recently qualified as an incubator, solely for game developers in Östergötland, which is a chunk of Sweden just south of Stockholm. And we're based in Linköping. A bit about my background. There's a bunch of logos there. I started out in the games industry. With writing for games or writing about games back in 2012, and I would continue writing, reviewing, covering, interviewing, and making columns about games and the game industry for another 5 years after that. And I started programming in 2013, and I studied game programming at the University of Skövde. And during my time at the university, I would also work with Donna and Divishi, who are different projects for supporting diversity and equality in the games industry. I was part of the regional Pride chapter, and I also organized Swedish Game Awards of 2016. And together with 4 other students from the game development programs, we started our first company, which was called Mostly Harmless Games, which is a horrible name for a studio if you have a lisp. And we released 2 titles there over a couple of years. And during the time there, I would also do extra work as a teacher at my own university and at Folkuniversitetet, who started a game development vocational education, Forsberg School in Stockholm, and a lot of different places. I would live month to month back then through our startup and through the extra jobs we did and studies for a little over 2 years. Before actually moving to Malmö for a bit, where I joined Divine Robot, a cool company down there. I was a project manager on their VR projects and their gamification projects and some other stuff. During my time there, I eventually realized that I was sort of overdue for a burnout. So I burned out, and then I moved back to Skövde, actually bought up mostly harmless games, and from that I started Miltonic Games, which is my private consulting company, and eventually I got picked up by Sweden Game, and Thomas Ahlström, who was the project manager there. And as late as last year, I actually moved to Linköping to work with Sweden Game, and I've been there for just over 2 years now. I would commute before then. And what I do is I help indie studios make and release their games and navigate the various jungles of startup life. And we've also started, or we're just about to start, our first local game education, which is post-gymnasial. It's called Valla Game Education, which is very exciting, starting this autumn. And since then, we've actually also started a new game studio or tech consulting company. It's called Zero Index, and it's me and Thomas Ahlström. So a lot of stuff in a short amount of time, and that's definitely way too much information about me, so I'll be moving on to my talk now. First of all, a disclaimer. My opinions that I express here do not represent the values or opinions of Sweden Game nor of Zero Index, but they do represent me, my opinions, and of course Miltonic Games, because that's my company. As with everything, take everything you're told with a grain of salt, always. Feel free to question everything that I say. The real title of my talk is The Things We Don't Talk About in Game Startups. And everything is not sunshine and rainbows. That's why I want to talk about these things. And while I definitely appreciate all the optimism and the positivity that we regularly throw at entrepreneurship, I think it'll benefit you as a startup more to know the real challenges of running a game studio. It'll help you to be ready to face those challenges with a strategy. All right. I'm digging in. Save all your questions for later, make a note of them so that I can answer them. If there is something messing up with my video or audio, someone let me know somewhere, ping me on Zoom maybe. But yeah, we'll dive right into it. The first truth bomb of the day, revenue per game is down. You probably know this, or you probably noticed at least. Just look at these numbers. These are, can I have a pointer? Yeah. These are the number of games being released every day. Every single day, between 30 and 40 games are released on Steam, which is the biggest PC platform. This doesn't include all the other alternative platforms, and Steam is the biggest in the Western countries, but still, this is what you're competing with if you're aiming for a Steam release. I think I'm lowballing the mobile numbers because it's hard to find reliable statistics. But across iOS and Android, I think it's likely to be between 1,000 and 2,000 game submissions every single day. A few years ago, being on Steam used to be a guarantee that your game would at least do decent, but now it's like throwing a twig in a bonfire. There are 0 guarantees. What you should know is how those games do once they're released. 80% of indie games, or rather all games that aren't easily classified as AAA, will make less than $5,000, less than 50,000 kronor. The absolute majority of games released do not break even. These figures are taken from Mike Rose from No More Robots and his talk, a deep dive into how games are selling on Steam from last year. And the numbers are from a period starting from early July to early August. So a 1-month segment of data with 900 games released in the data pool. So quite reliable, but of course not super. But I want to talk about what can we do about these things. For each point, for each uncomfortable truth, there should be something that we can learn from this. And of course, this can seem very obvious, but what you can do about this huge market saturation is make sure that you build very strong customer awareness. Make sure that people know about your game, do your marketing, do your ads, reach out to media, do whatever it takes to make sure that people know that your game exists and that they can buy it. Perhaps even more important, build and maintain your own community. Make sure that the people who are interested in your game are fully aware of what's going on and can influence the development of your game. And of course, don't underestimate the tail. I'll get back to this a bit, but basically, once you release a game, the majority of your sales will peak in the first week or maybe 2 weeks. The first very first few days after you release a game is where you're going to sell most of your copies, unless something extraordinary happens. But you're going to have a huge peak, and then you're going to dip down into a valley again, and then you're just going to have a very slow tail, all a few units of sales per day. That's the typical pattern for most premium games. One shot, pay once, you own the game. Have a peak of sales in the beginning, and then very little. But as you release more and more games, that tail will grow because you'll have more games that accumulate revenue. And you shouldn't underestimate the value of having multiple games out that are selling at least a few copies every day. More about that later. Excuse me. The second thing you should know is that games are way too cheap. The value, or rather the price per hour of gameplay has just plummeted. People are more willing to pay for 2 hours of cinema than for 10 hours of gameplay at the same price. A 10-hour game for $10 can be a deal breaker for a lot of people, or if not, the case could just be that they will regularly wait for it to be on sale anyway. You know. Everything is bought on sale these days. It's it's like Kutim, I don't know the word for it, that you buy a game at least 40% off. So when you're calculating your own revenue, or when you're trying to estimate how much you're making on your game sales, I usually say that you earn around 50 cents on the dollar. That's a very rough number. Some will say that it's a little bit high, but it all depends on how you work with discounts and bundles in different ways. I think that 50% is moderately close to the truth. So if you sell a game for 100 kronor, that's what the consumer pays, you should expect to receive around, or at most, 50 of those kronor. That's good to know. So what can you do about this? First of all, you should probably aim to make experiences that can be reasonably priced at above $20, right? Not 20, but over 20, 21 and up, 24.99, 29.99. Games that are sold at that price range they sell much better. They get more buyers, and they sell more units, and they make just way more revenue. It's not just about the content. It's not about making a $25 game. It's about also valuing your game in a better way, setting a fair price on your own game. Because value is relative, and value is absolutely perceived. If you offer your game for $10, solely because that's what you expect people to expect the game to be priced, then you're perpetuating the perception that your game is worth more than $10, or that games of the same quality aren't worth more than $10, and you are actively devaluing your own game. People are generally willing to pay pretty fair prices for something that brings them joy and stimulation, but at the same time, we have to battle against the active devaluing of games as entertainment. I think you should be conservative with your discounts. You should avoid having big sales, especially early, like the first year of your game being out. If people know that your game has been out for a 50% discount, they're less likely to buy it at anything less or anything higher than that. And the same thing goes for bundles. You are losing out on a lot of revenue if you go for big commercial bundles, not just like a bundle of your own games, the My Studio pack, but rather, I'm not going to tell any names, but there are other alternative game stores where you can put up your games along with others, and you get a very small percent of your profit. I did that. We did that for a couple of our games. The paperwork of just managing the incomes from that wasn't worth the money we made from those bundles, despite it being thousands of copies of our game being distributed. So I would say avoid those. Just gonna see if there's something being written in the chat. Are those questions, or I'm not used to Zoom? No, I don't know how this works. I'll keep talking. Keep trying to contact me if there's something wrong with my audio or video. The next thing I want to talk about is what I call the Band-Aid rule. A friend of mine came up with that during a meeting. Basically, you should know that your first game is just statistically unlikely to be a commercial success. All right, it's harsh, but it's just very, very likely. Unless you have a very overwhelming hype for some reason, you went viral or something early in your development, there are almost no guarantees that your game will do ultra well if it's your first game as a studio. You don't have a brand worked up yet. You don't have a trademark to back up what you're making. Not the game itself, but your studio. You wouldn't know overwhelming hype unless you've actually seen it. You wouldn't know when you're actually there. And essentially getting too attached to your project is just very, very dangerous because in reality, most developers are forced to scratch a lot of their games, even the best games, even if they're almost ready for release, because they have the tools and the knowledge that tells them that the game won't do well and it's not worth releasing it with all the live operations and post-release work. I've seen AA and AAA titles that are gold mastered. They're ready to be released. They're good to go, but maintaining marketing for the game post-release has been calculated to be unprofitable, and so they scrapped years of work just down the drain. A game that's fully viable to release, but it won't work, and they already know that. We as indies can tend to have a game idea with no traction, little or no feedback, having no idea if people will even enjoy the game at all, and we'll still insist on working just one more month or one more quarter, one more year to make sure it's perfect. That's what's called sunk cost. That's the dumb idea that if you invest just a little more time and resources into a worthless project, the value will eventually increase. But it rarely ever does. The only thing you're actually doing is digging a deeper and deeper hole under your own feet. That's what's going on. So what I think you should do is you should just release your first game quickly, as fast as possible. Rip it off like a Band-Aid, hence the name. It can be very disappointing and demoralizing to hear that you won't make a lot of money from your first game. It probably won't even fund your next game, even if it's a small project. But what you should do is you should make note of all the things you learn while you're making and releasing that first game. Because those learnings, that'll be the biggest value that you can take with you from that release. That will save you a lot of time. It'll save you a lot of confusion for your next release. And you can do it all over and over again, even better. And every time you release a new game, you get smarter and you get better. So just keep making games. And don't stop, because you need to be ready to release maybe 2 or 3 or 5, maybe even 10 games, starting on your turnaround speed, that where none of these games barely break even on the costs that you put into it. But you have to keep doing it in the hopes of striking gold with a project or an IP. But again, it's not all horrible. Remember that as you release more and more games, and you have ongoing, ongoing revenue streams, you're starting to build up that tail that I mentioned. And you don't want to underestimate that tail. You will build up revenue streams that'll make it easier and easier for your studio to finance yourselves. Right, maybe. Right, moving on. Thresholds 1, 2, 3, persistence is key. This is more anecdotal. These are things that I have observed. So throw some more extra salt on these ones. But in my experience, a full year of working together means overcoming a whole lot of hurdles. Hopefully, at least releasing at least one game, and reaching at least some point where you reevaluate your priorities as a team and actively choose to move forward together with the studio. That I think that takes around a year, and coming out of that threshold means coming out as a stronger, more solid team with your company. 2 years to get tired, less fun. After about 2 years into our first startup, we noticed that motivation was very low, morale was low. Most people had second thoughts about the company itself. And out of the blue, a investor shows up. And he said that he wants to invest in our company. And I pressed him because, as far as I was concerned, we weren't making anything promising at the time. We weren't very efficient. We just weren't doing well right then. We were quite tired, basically. And so I pressed him on why he insisted on talking to us. And eventually he actually explained that he did this systematically. He would look up tech companies that had worked for around or just over 2 years without any major success. And he would offer to buy them cheap, restructure the business to fit his needs, whatever they were. Because after 2 years, he said most startups are too tired to go on, and they either dissolve or they let themselves be purchased for cheap. We agreed that this was true. we couldn't argue against that, and then we turned them down because we didn't want to be part of that. But I think there's some kind of truth in that. 2 years of working on something without, having a big breakthrough, that's demoralizing, that's tough, but that's probably an accurate estimation of how much time you can spend before you're starting to consider giving up. So you want to push through that, because after that, something cool happens. After about 3 years in probably any industry, if you're at least somewhat active at events or on social media or on other forums or activities like these talks and stuff, you'll start getting recognized for your work, and your network should be big enough that you can probably sustain your own company on work for hire projects alone. Before that 3-year threshold, finding projects is usually quite hard. It probably doesn't pay very well. People don't know who you are, what you've done, and they can't trust that you're good at delivering on your promises. But once you have been around and you've been around for 3 or more years, things will come to you much easier, and they'll come to you much faster. They'll know you from, oh, you're the guy who ran the game studio, or you're the one who held that lecture, or I met you at that event. And getting in touch with more people and finding partners gets so much easier. So definitely look forward to that. I can say that running Mostly Harmless, a group of 5 students with no prior experience, no network in the game industry, we struggled a lot. We did as much work for hire as we could to fund our game projects. They paid terribly, a lot of them, and they were very hard to find. We'd stumble across them, and we'd have to work with things that are outside of our comfort zone, or that just doesn't have anything to do with games. But we went by pretty well. After 3 years, after I've bought the company, I'm getting a lot of interesting offers. People contact me for a lot of cool kinds of work related to that are relevant. They're related to game development and the such. So yeah, I think I've felt a very concrete change there. And what can you do about it? Okay, first of all, I think it's important that you and everyone in your team really know what you want. This is something we struggled with in our first startup, knowing what our end-term goals were long-term. We spent an hour every week for over a year discussing our company vision, something very fundamental, very basic, but extremely hard to define. What was the goal, and what did we want to accomplish with our company? And we couldn't agree on anything. We struggled so hard and we worked for so long, but we realized eventually that we couldn't come up with a strong vision that everyone could get behind for our company. You need to have that vision, and you need to know what everyone you work with expects and where you want to see yourself in the future. If you don't have a shared vision, you'll slowly bring yourselves down. Making a game with your friends is great, but it might not be a sustainable basis for running your company. or on the contrary, maybe your colleagues that you're working with are great to work with as friends and should stay that way, but they have different values when it comes to running a business. Maybe not to making games or making a specific genre or whatever, but as partners and co-owners of a game company, the situation might be very different. And in the same way, you should differ from a hobby and a business. Again, making games is a lot of fun, but if you are serious about it and you want to make games as a mean to sustain yourself, you need to take part of every part of game development, not just the fun developing, prototyping, and going to events and stuff. You have to take everything seriously. And that includes finding your monetization strategies, your business and revenue models. You need to do marketing, community management. You need to make content creation for your store platforms, find external relations, pitching, funding, auditing, hiring, and firing, and all the stuff that a company does, warts and all, not just the fun part of making a game. You have to be ready to do all of those things. And don't forget that the longer you do something, the better you become at it and the more confident you will become. So make sure that the team and the company are and want the same thing, and in time you can achieve anything. Right. Ideas are free. A great game idea has no value, I'm afraid. And a great game that is finished but doesn't have a market is actually also worthless. It's sad, but very true. And some realize this the hard way. And even a great game with a market, but no customer awareness, of course, is also worthless. If no one knows your game exists, no one will buy your game. These are tough truths, but it's the truth. And sometimes, even when conditions are really perfect, great games can flop because you can be out of luck. Game ideas, you can't really sell an idea. It's very hard. You can't really patent an idea. That's also very hard. You have some copyright going on with your code and your assets and stuff, but the idea itself, there's not much you can do to protect it. The only thing you can really do with an idea is create that game yourself. And in the end, great ideas on paper or in theory can be actually really boring in practice. And some ideas that sound really boring when they're pitched can be amazingly fun to actually play. Everything comes down to execution, how you make the game. And you kind of need to work things out from the wrong way. You need to find your strategy to release your game and figure out what your product market fit is. Google that, and then you can make a game based on a potentially good idea that you have. But if you ever have an idea that sort of feels original, chances are quite high that someone else has already hatched that idea or is about to at any moment. I recommend writing down any idea. I don't think there are good ideas or bad ideas. I think there are ideas, and they can become almost anything. So I write down all my game ideas. Most of them are probably very, very bad. I have a Google Doc where I save them all. Last I checked, I'm up to 150 games, each with their own individual elevator pitch. It's up to 27 pages now, starting to lag when it's loading. But like I said, most of these games are probably really bad in practice if you try to make them. But these ideas can synergize. I can use these to map out new ideas. Some of these games might even be good. I know a few of them have been prototyped. A couple of them have been commercially released by me or my studio. Some ideas we just dismissed without even giving it a second thought, and some we even plan to develop. In a very few number of instances, we were actually too late. There are a number of these games that have been released. Here's just one of many ideas that I wrote down in my document. That was during the summer of 2015, I think. So Toddler Sim is an asymmetric one versus one baby simulator, where the baby does dangerous things and the parent desperately tries to keep it safe. It's really dumb. We knew that. It's controversial. We made a lot of risk analysis with it. We talked to a lot of people. But at the time, sarcastic simulator games were like all the craze back then. That was just as big as the Battle Royale hype at the time. We had Surgeon Simulator and Goat Simulator paving the way. So we decided to go for it. We eventually allocated time. We set up a Unity project. We started designing the game and prototyping, and then bam. This game just popped up on early access, and it became viral before we could even grasp what was going on. Looking at the description of this game, Who's Your Daddy, we could see that it was the exact game we were designing. We almost started looking for bugs in our office if someone had listened into our conversations, because it was almost word for word in their description. Of course, it was a bit uglier than we had planned to make it, but essentially our entire market for this game or this game idea had been pulled just from under our feet. Of course, the worst part was it sold over 1 million copies and got really great reviews, because of course it did. Fate just wanted us to hurt that thing. Again, ideas are free and they're obviously rarely unique. If someone has probably already thought of your game idea, and once you're starting to put an idea into development, it will be your job to find out why it hasn't already been made or hasn't already been released. Chances are high that someone has already thought of the idea, tested it, and deemed that it was a bad idea. It won't work in practice. But if you're lucky, it's an idea that hasn't been put into practice yet. It could be a matter of time. It could be a race with another developer that haven't announced yet. So getting your game out there quickly will be key if you think that you have a really good game idea. Basically, you need to always be working to minimize your risk. The target audience of your game doesn't have to be everyone. It can be extremely niche. It's actually even better if it's very niche. If you make the best possible game for a very small audience, you don't have to compete with all the titans. You need to know your competition, though, who they are, what they're making, and what makes your game different from their games. All right, so if you're working on a game right now, or if you have a good idea, the first thing you should absolutely do, and the first thing I always do, is go ahead and look up the 20 most similar games. I think 20 is probably a minimum number you want to work with. The 20 most similar games to your idea in all the different aspects, and read every review made for that game that is marked helpful, at least. And at the end of it, it'll take a few days and it's quite boring. But once you've done that, once you've just consumed all that information about those games, you will know every single strength and every single weakness that you need to have with you to compete with those. You will know what you can do better than those games and what you can pivot towards to make your game more attractive or more unique. Know your market. Market fit means that you have a proven demand for what you're making. If you're making a game that is just identical to what your competitors have, why would they buy your game? If they can have the same thing, or maybe even a better version of the same thing, or they already own that game, why would they have to buy your game? It wouldn't make sense for them to purchase that. You have to excel and exceed within that genre or niche and become the natural choice for that market. You have to be oumbärlig. You have to be the absolute game that you have to buy, the must try. And I think that accessibility is something we should talk more about. I'm sure you're being told about accessibility a lot, maybe not. I know I was when we were starting our first company. Everyone talked about accessibility, but not how many different kinds there are. People underestimate the meaning of accessibility. It comes in many shapes and sizes, and every option or extra feature of accessibility that you ignore is a market segment that you actively alienate. All right, that's how you have to think about it. And obvious factors of accessibility are things like, can your game be played by visually impaired players, people with hearing difficulties, or people who are motorically impaired? Again, quite obvious, but still very important groups that obviously also want to play games. We have to respect that. But remember that even if they're a smaller group than your average player, they are also part of a smaller market. They also have a much more narrow selection of products to choose from, because most games wouldn't have those options for them. So you could be one of those games that cater to those markets, and that's just added value. There are other aspects of accessibility can just be, are they availability. You can, if possible, bring your game to all the applicable platforms. Like if you release a game on Xbox, you have the whole Xbox market. But if you also release it on PlayStation, if it's an easy port, then you doubled your market, roughly. Could your game be playable on mobile units or on iPads or what do you say, surfplattor, and other storefronts, other operating systems. Maybe most important of all, language translations. We don't really think about that as much as other game developers in other countries do, but most Swedes are bilingual. We don't have a problem with English media because we understand and we speak and read English, but the same does not apply in the rest of the world. Definitely not. 60% of Western PC games are bought by non-English speaking groups. 60%. Germans play and consume German media, things that are made in German or translated to German. The same in Spain, the same in Italy, France, Latin America, all of Asia, the biggest flipping chunk of the entire world. They don't necessarily consume any kind of English media. Would you throw out 60% of all your potential customers just because you don't want to translate your game? That's a pretty small effort to add on top of your game, especially if you plan for it ahead, to more than double your potential market. Never forget that, 60%. Of course, be mindful of timing. You can look at what other games are being released at the same time as you. Typically less important for small and niche titles. But at the same time, you don't want to be overshadowed by massive hype trains like Animal Crossing or just another indie title with a very, very similar theme or gameplay or style. Again, know your competitors. And at the end of the day, provided that you've done your homework, marketed your game adequately, you're still going to need to hope for a pinch of luck that your game catches on organically and gets noticed by enough people. There's always a factor of luck. So knowing all this, is it time to start panicking? Should you be worried? I think it kind of depends on what you're trying to accomplish. If your goal is to get filthy rich quickly and easily, I think you might be in to be disappointed. If you wanted that, go invest in real estate instead. Be rich already, invest that money, become even richer. That's how you get filthy rich. But really, if you're actually very, very passionate about making games, you are in for a world of fun and excitement, because making games is fun. It's incredible. It's very rewarding. You get to learn a lot. You meet a lot of really amazing people. Basically, if you just do your homework, remember everything that you learn, and you never give up on your passion, I think that anyone can succeed in games. And I don't know about you, maybe you feel like this is me right now. This is what you feel like after saying all these nasty things about the industry that you love. But I love you, and I want you to know these things, because I think that if you still want to make games after knowing all these things, you really have what it takes to make the cut. You will be successful. You will do well. And with that, I'd like to say thank you so much for taking your time and for inviting me. I'll be more than happy to take your questions right here and now, or if you want to DM me on Twitter, just slide right in. I'm always available to chat, and more than happy to help you with your questions.
Super. Can you hear us?
Absolutely. This is when you tell me that my mic was on mute all the time.
No, it worked really well. Super interesting and inspiring talk, I would say. I think you need to end the screen share.
All right, I'll do.
Super. Right, we're going to have some questions for you. If anyone has any thoughts, just write them in the Q&A tool. And I have some questions for you already. I wanted to start asking you what platforms or did you develop for mobile or for PC in your earlier companies?
The first game was a local multiplayer PC game. The goal was to release it to consoles as well, but we decided not to go that way because the game didn't do very well on PC. The second game was a VR game for PC VR, so Vive and Oculus and the such. That was actually ported to some mobile platforms as well in collaboration with some hardware developers, but a PC game and a VR game, basically.
Yeah, because my thought is when it comes to the tail, if you look at like mobile games and free-to-play games, I would say the sales looks quite different. Like you maybe don't have any sales at all in the beginning, but as you begin to build awareness of the game and you release more features, it might get a bigger tail.
Absolutely, and everything is connected to that monetization model. Like if you do a one-off premium game with no extra content, no free updates, no paid updates, DLC, that's a completely different world from releasing a free-to-play game, even on the same platform.
Yeah, absolutely. I was also thinking, as you are a part of the eSweden game, and you have an incubator as well, because I see the same as you, that the first game is usually not a success. But when you work with an incubator, you usually have to like pitch your game and that company, and the company is usually built on that first game, and it probably won't be a success, and it's usually quite hard for an incubator to take in the game companies, but still that's the way you need to go to build successful game companies. You just need to iterate and develop new games. How do you look at that from the eSweden game perspective?
Oh, we have very diverse teams. It's really fun actually. But we have all kinds of developers working on all kinds of games. Most of our members do not come from an established game education, but are self-taught, work out of passion. We have some with a turnaround speed of 2 to 3 months that'll just absolutely spew out games under different brands and have a very high turnaround speed, being very experimental. And we see that they learn a lot, but they can suffer from some of the challenges of releasing games with the smaller production value. It's hard to charge $25 for a game, or it's rather it's hard to produce a game in 2 or 3 months that you can charge $25 or $30 for. And the other way around, we always encourage people to put some pressure on their own game development, because most of these people have found that their goal is to find an external financing partner, like a publisher. But publishers will also need to pay for some of the costs of the studio, and the biggest cost being salaries, meaning that 1 extra month of development time means a whole lot more costs. It just gets very, very expensive in time compared to doing the marketing and the porting or other services around releasing that game. So from every aspect, it's always valuable to focus on getting a game out relatively quickly, or at least make progress quickly, like releasing milestones or doing a vertical slice first to prove what you can make and prove the value of your game. So as an incubator, everyone is welcome to work in every model they want, but we do encourage some sort of speed to, like I said, minimize risk.
Yeah. Sounds wise. I also reflected on like you had these 1-hour meetings weekly to discuss the vision. Was it just the company vision or also the game vision?
No, that was the company vision. We realized that we had focused a lot on our projects. We knew exactly what our game were to be, but we didn't know what connected the first and the second game or the third game. We didn't have any direction for anything in our future. And it was hard to build a brand around a company that didn't stand for anything. Not just like our values, but rather what we were trying to accomplish. If you're a studio like Paradox, you have a long list of values and ideas, pillars that you can base every decision on. Every game can be fitted into this template, and you can see how and why it fits the brand of the studio. And that's incredible, and that's powerful. That means that when a new game is released, your community and your fans will know sort of what to expect based on the kind of studio you are. But we've made a local multiplayer game about forklifts and then a VR game about being a fish. No, exactly. No correlation. There's nothing that binds the two together. And it gave us no sense of direction for what the third game was. But we figured that if we would have a vision, we could have that as a guiding star for the rest of our titles and the type of work that we decided to work with, or just what kind of investor we could imagine working with. Everything would be easier if we had that guiding star. And despite our efforts, we couldn't find one, and we eventually figured that that was just a good reason for us not to continue with the company.
Okay, cool. Just regarding that, if we talk about like how you develop game ideas, I know you talked about pillars. That's a process that Paradox really works a lot with. Do you have any specific idea how to develop new game ideas?
I think that I have a lot of thoughts on it, but it's kind of situational. And I think that there's an inflation of thoughts on the subject. At the end of it all, just doing stuff will usually be the most valuable. Taking your idea and actually prototyping it, testing it for real, that will give you the most information about what the finished product could be like. If it's fun, if people want to pay for it, if it easily goes viral. Making a demo, making a prototype is the best way to get information about a game idea. And always, like I said, never dismiss an idea as bad. Think of it as just fluff, and enough fluff and the right pieces of fluff together could make a really cool game idea. But definitely prototyping quickly is a very good way to get an idea of your own game.
Yeah. Good. I also wanted to ask you how you work with monitoring competing game ideas.
So there used to be very good aggregation tools like Steam Spy and Steam DB to find information about sales and stuff. It's very good to know how competitor games are doing. Now we've sort of gone back in time on that data front, and instead people are developing algorithms to estimate sales and estimate success based on reviews and ratings and such. There are some really cool tools on that, but I think that the storefronts themselves are the best source of information. Just searching, looking for keywords, talking to other people who play the games that you're making. For instance, if you're making a roguelike dungeon crawler, you'll probably have a good idea of what makes a good dungeon crawler if you yourself are a fan of those games and you play those games regularly. It's hard to make a game in a genre that you aren't passionate about yourself as a consumer. I think you have definitely an edge if you're a fan of your own kind of game. And if you are a fan of that kind of game, then you'll also know which other games are out there. You know what you've played, and you should easily be able to figure out what other games are being played. Looking at lists like games similar to this, or looking at keywords in genres like procedural generation. Look for a procedural generation tag on Steam, maybe. There's likely to be one there, and you'll be able to find more games like the ones you're looking for, and then just list them all in a big old spreadsheet, list the sale price, list the reviews, list the key points that people make in the reviews, like what they like and what they don't like, and you'll start forming like a big mind map or picture of what makes those games interesting.
I'm was thinking about the Who's Your Daddy game. I mean, it's an obvious risk that you start to develop a game, do it for quite a while, and when you're getting ready to release, there's another game that has been released, and you don't even know about it. So you need to do some continuous monitoring.
Exactly. So there's a double-edged sword there where you have to be first to market, but also make a strong impression. Like, some people don't want to show off their games before they have a good trailer or good enough gameplay. I personally feel like people should be definitely first to market with their game ideas to make sure that things like that doesn't happen. Because Who's Your Daddy released the game with very little content. There was, I think it was just a video on YouTube and a mostly empty, some screenshots or placeholder screenshots on a Steam store page. But that little information made them the baby simulator game, made us irrelevant in a heartbeat, even with very little information. So making a new game, I think, always try to get a Steam store page up as soon as possible. Like, the second you know that this is a game you want to follow through with, or most likely will follow through with, you can always take the page down if you change your mind. As soon as you feel moderately secure about your game idea, get the store page up so that you're first to market. And then just keep an eye out. Follow, I think Reddit is one of my biggest sources on new and fun ideas, because there are a lot of hardcore fans there. They're on game dev and gaming, and they'll share funny posts. If something goes viral, it almost always reaches Reddit. Checking out YouTube and things that are hot and new on the Steam store page as well are good sources of finding new games that are coming or being released.
Super. I just have one final question, and that is stories of failure. I think it's always interesting to learn, like, during your development of these games, were there some nasty surprises in that were really bad, like IP troubles, or I mean, it's usually from these things you learn the most, things that really was bad in that company.
Absolutely. I think that failure stories are super important, because they teach us much more than the success stories. We don't know the pitfalls of life. I think my entire claim to fame as a business coach, I have no coach education. I don't have anything that qualifies me to be a coach, except a long list of various failures and mistakes I've made that I can that I can help others avoid in their careers. I could make another talk just on that. Our entire first game was a local multiplayer party game that required controllers on PC. That meant that for 4 players who wanted to play the game, only one needed to buy it. We reduced our number of consumers by up to 75%, and alienated even more because most people don't have 4 PC compatible USB controllers readily available at home. Our entire first game project was commercially a very bad idea. Basically, it worked for Gang Beast, and we thought it could work for us, but that wasn't the case. The list goes on, I assure you.
So we'll have another talk then another time.
Yeah.
All right, thank you very much, Alexander, for participating. It was a pleasure to listen to you. It's really interesting, and I think all the people in our network will be really interested in hearing this as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah. So for next week, we have a new guest. We have Stefan Lampinen.
Yeah, we will have a short introduction film from him next Wednesday, same time as today, 9:45, June 10, I think it is. So don't miss.
Hi, I'm Stefan Lampinen. I think some of you already know me. Been in the industry for a very long time, first with Sega, then Electronic Arts, Xbox, and so on. Today I'm running my own business since many years back with Game Advisor Limited. We do introduction, business intelligence, and advisory, sometimes to big companies, and nowadays mostly to smaller startups. My idea for the Arctic Game Talk is to talk about trends, global outlook, what's happening now when all the events is cancelled. And on top of that, also look in how do you do perfect pitch for an investor, what you think about, and so on. I also hope that after my presentation, we will have many questions to me so we can have a fruitful dialogue. Cheers. Bye.